Hey guys, it's Julian, and today, as you can see, I'm back in my old studio. We're going to be talking about how to make modular techno in the style of Mike Parker, Stanislav Tolckachev, sort of darker stuff where it's a lot of really cool sonic textures, but I'm going to be showing you how to do it with entirely Ableton stuff, because the truth is, a lot of those modular sounds, while you can make them on modular gear pretty easily, and it does kind of like lend itself to that, I think that a lot of the concepts there can be spread to other synthesizers as well. Like, a lot of what's happening with a modular synth is really just kind of like, it's making it a little bit easier to do some things that you could do in any synth, but it's just that the modular synth will kind of bring you a little bit more inspiration. So, I'm going to show you how to do all that stuff just with Ableton gear and some pretty straightforward stuff. As usual, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI presets, everything like that from this video is available at the top of the description on my Bandcamp, and it's also available on my Patreon if you're a patron, so check there. And yeah, let's get started. So, right off the bat, we're on 140 BPM, and the first thing we have up here is actually the 808 core kit. So what's happening here is, you can see, it's just creating this little sort of like background hi-hat loop. And what's happening is, like I said, this is just Ableton's 808 core kit. So you can, I'm trying to do this to show you guys, you can do this with almost anything, like literally just the most basic drum kit. But what's happening here is it's playing this little pattern. You know, pretty straightforward sort of thing there, kind of just adding some nice rhythm to the groove. But then what's happening is it's going through a low-pass filter, which has an LFO on it, and that's got that saw wave down. So what's happening is the LFO is on quarter notes, and then we're getting like this really kind of cool, like, moving texture with the actual notes that are being played. So this is kind of like a really good thing that you can learn from modular synthesis. Is a lot of what makes those modular sounds cool is the fact that you're hearing like the notes do one thing, and then the modulation of the filter or whichever parameters you're modulating are doing another thing. And then you're combining those two movements together, and that's what's creating a sound like this. You can also do this with eighth notes and get some cool stuff too. But yeah, it's a really interesting way to kind of make some more interesting percussion there. And then I just have a bit of echo on that. A little bit of grain away, you can hear just adding some background stuff. And yeah, then we have this ambient percussion. So this is more just kind of like, you know, more background stuff. Again, this type of stuff is really important. Like, these percussions really add up, because if I play you the whole track with just like the kick and the 909 hi-hat, obviously it's good. But you can see, as I bring in each of these little background layers I've been showing you, like, they really add a lot. And especially, like, with these really simple tracks like this, like, if you're gonna be making a track where it's like, you know, this ARP for the whole track, you gotta have this little kind of background stuff to really add, like, a lot more movement and just kind of bring the track to life. So here, again, it's just like this little shaker. And then this operator patch. And what this is doing is it's just some white noise going into a bandpass filter here. And then what I'm doing is, you can see we have an LFO on the filter cutoff. And that's, I've got the retrigger turned off, and then it's on the sample and hold, which basically means random LFO. So what's happening here is now the filter frequency is jumping around with every new note that we play. And this way we get like a really nice kind of like evolving percussion here. You can hear it sits just really well on the hi-hat. So yeah, again, that's another idea, like with a lot of modular synthesis, it's just kind of like taking synth sounds and bringing them to life like this, you know, thinking about how to animate them rather than just have them kind of sit in one place. And then this is also just going through a bit of chorus, pretty standard stuff there. And then on the group of the ambient percussion, we just have a bit of echo doing dotted eighth notes, some saturation to kind of make them a bit fatter and kind of come through in the mix a bit more. And then finally, just a high pass filter. Then we have this 909 hi-hat, which is pretty standard stuff. The one thing that I did notice with a lot of these tracks, though, is even though this is like that main hi-hat that's going to be bouncing off of your kick, it's not actually as big as you would think. Like, with a lot of techno tracks, you know, you want to make that big, like, but this, you actually just want this, like, shorter little 909 hi-hat. You can see I even shortened it. And if you make it too long, you can actually mess up the groove. And that kind of throws it off to me if it's too long. And then just that little... and that's just going through a little bit of reverb. Then we have this evolving bass. So yeah, this is meant to be kind of like this, more of a background synth sound, but really important for the overall track. Like, this is one of those things where it kind of plays underneath the art and adds to what that's doing. Like, it's all kind of one thing, but then, like, if I take this one out, you can see the track feels kind of empty without that. And so what this is doing is it's doing this, like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I'll turn off the echo so you can really hear it. So you have that happening, and then it's just constantly going. And then what we've got here is I have this synth patch in operator here, where you can see, if we go into here, I have the velocity mapped to these two things right here. So this is this oscillator crossfade between A and C, and this is the crossfade between B and D. So essentially what's happening is it's kind of like blending the FM there a little bit based on the velocity. And then what we're doing is I have this total random device here. So what this does is it just creates a constantly random velocity for your notes. So you can put in, like, just all of these have the same velocity, but now it's constantly changing the velocity. So then when we put that into operator, now we get this cool morphing, evolving synth that's never going to be exactly the same thing twice. And again, this is one of those techniques that I was talking about, like, from modular synthesis. Like, this isn't exactly the way you would do it on a modular synth, but just kind of thinking about, like, how we can create, like, constantly changing sounds with a synth without having to sit there and just automate everything. Because obviously, like, you know, you could, if you want to, just sit here and take all the parameters that are being modulated by this velocity and just automate them. But this way, you know, it's a little bit more free. It's kind of a little bit more based on the feeling of making a track and less about actually, like, automating stuff. So for the actual sound on this one, what it is it's just 3 sine waves here with the square 6 in the middle. You can see, yeah, there are different octaves. I've got the second one detuned a lot as well. And then that's going into a low-pass filter with an envelope as well as a sine shaper. And then we also have an LFO on the filter cutoff and the volume of oscillator B. So lots of things being moved at once, and it just creates this nice, like, constantly evolving bass line in the background. And yeah, then you can see we have a bit of echo on that, so I've got this 16th note echo, and then this dotted 8th note echo kind of like stacked on top of each other. And those are going into this resonator, which here's without that. And with it you can hear just kind of add some nice, like, metallic texture to this, kind of make it feel a bit more modular. Then we just have the short reverb, which is really just kind of making this feel like it's got, like, a bit of room to it. I have a compressor, sidechaining this to the kick, and then finally just a high-pass filter to cut out the low end so it doesn't get in the way of the kick. And yeah, then we have the kick. So it's a rumble kick. We have our main kick layer, and then we have our rumble. So for the main kick layer, it's one of these kicks that I've made a little while back. And then what's happening here is we're doing kind of a very tight multiband distortion to it. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to get that, like, nice kind of almost like 90s-esque, like, to your kick, you know, like that perfect, very, like, almost distorted, but not quite too crunchy sort of kick, if you guys know what I'm talking about. So that's what this does. Essentially what's happening here, as you can see, we have one chain, which is just the normal dry kick. And then this chain here where we're distorting it, you can see I've got a high-pass filter so that we're not going to distort the low end. And then I have this pedal, which is the distortion. And then this high-pass filter at the end, just make sure and that's not adding any low end that's going to get in the way of the main kick. And then we're just blending them, and that's the idea here, to get this like kind of distorted but still punchy kick. As you guys know, like if you just drop the pedal on the whole kick at once, like you can do that, but see, you get that. So to avoid that, this is the best way. Again, it's just like keeping it as a layer that's really just like in the mid-range and highs. And then we get this nice, really punchy kick. And then for the rumble, it's made using the same kick. And what's happening here is we're doing a pretty straightforward sort of rumble, but it's just very well made. What's happening is, yeah, so we have the kick just going. And it goes into a bit of a delay. Now, I noticed with this style, typically, if you're using the delay to do the rumble, or even if you're doing a reverb, you want a shorter feedback. So, like, just having that shorter, like, versus, like, having the longer one. You really just want, like, a little, like, so we got that. And then we have this amp here to kind of distort it. And then we're taking just the low end. And then I have it sidechained to the kick. And then finally just this EQ to cut out the frequencies that we're not going to be hearing that are just going to kind of get in the way of the headroom in the mix. And the last sound down here is the evolving art. So the notes for this ARP don't necessarily always follow music theory. Like, we're in the key of B minor, I guess you could say. That's what I tuned, like, that's the main note here. And then also that's what I tuned that evolving bass to. But if you look, like, it kind of breaks that a little bit. Or excuse me, I think we're in, like, E, but you can see, like, it's kind of not E. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's kind of, you know, with these kind of lead lines, you're not always going to follow music theory. Like, a lot of times, like, you really just want to find notes that are going to sound cool. And it's also kind of thinking of the notes more as, like, individual drum hits than, like, you know, the way you would think of, like, a melody, you know? So, the way I'm thinking about this here is, for example, like, this D. You notice that kind of always comes back at that. And then, like, it's a lot more like a percussion phrase than it is like an actual, like, melody. But that's how you want to think about this. Again, like, I think if you think about this too much like a melody, you're not ever going to be able to write one of these. The other thing you'll notice here is that the velocities are all over the place. And that kind of goes back to what I was showing you before. We're using that a little bit with Operator here to make the synth sound a bit more morphing and changing. So again, like, the velocities don't mean anything unless you actually go in and do this, which I'm going to show you in a second. But yeah, like, just having, like, a lot of variation here is going to be important, because what we're going to do in this next one, as you can see in Operator, I've got the velocity mapped to the filter frequency, as well as that oscillator crossfade between B and D. So now, same thing, you're getting this, like, always changing and morphing sound. And if we turn that off, you can see it's a lot more flat. So to really kind of, like, unlock the synth and get that more kind of, like, animated, like, modular sort of sound, you gotta go in and do stuff like this. And again, like, I think a lot of times modular synths are doing this. I'm not the biggest expert on modular, but I know, like, modular synths are kind of doing this through, like, step sequencers and stuff like that. So I'm showing you guys how you can do those same techniques, but using the Ableton gear. And for this one, it's just made with sine waves. You can see, yeah, it's just like this super plucky, kind of punchy thing. You can see, these are all, like, detuned a lot. If I put this back to the standard note, you can see it's missing that kind of, like, metallic, uneasy thing. So that's going to be really important there. And then we also have a low-pass filter here with a bit of an envelope. And then I have an LFO on, actually, the pitch of these three oscillators, as well as the volume of oscillator C. And if I turn that off, you can hear it's just a little bit too flat. So this just really makes it feel, it gives it that last extra bit of life. And yeah, then after that we have this audio effect track, and what this is doing is I actually have a frequency shifter in here, and then we're just kind of like blending it with the dry signal. So we have, that's the dry signal. And then yeah, I just have like all these automations on this frequency shifter. The interesting thing that happens here is when you blend this with the dry signal, you get this cool like phaser effect, and you can even turn that up more. I just didn't want it to be too crazy, but yeah. Then we just have a bit of chorus. You can see that I've got the feedback turned up, so that's giving that more metallic kind of thing that you've been hearing. We also have some echo on dotted quarter notes, so it's like a very slow echo. Typically, if you have a really fast arp like this, you want to do a slower delay. And then we have some reverb, a compressor, just sidechaining it a little bit to the kick, not too much. But just so you get that, like, kind of, like, it makes your head bob, you know? Then we have a high-pass filter, and then actually I'm being sidechained again. Again, like, sometimes you have to kind of finesse it. Like, you might say, oh, well, why don't you just have one sidechain that's a bit heavier? But, you know, making music, especially making music like this, is not always logical. Sometimes it sounds better to do something like this than it does to just go and take the compressor and turn that threshold down more. So that's what we got there. And yeah, so that's gonna be it for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe, and let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project files, samples, MIDI, presets, everything like that from this video is available right at the top of the description. Definitely go check that out if you guys are enjoying these videos. I don't make a whole lot just off of the YouTube videos alone, but with the sample packs and different things like this, I'm able to keep bringing you guys new content every single day that isn't out there, and really showing you guys stuff like this too, you know, not just like, oh, here's how you make techno, but here's how you can take these devices that are really expensive that a lot of people are using and do the same exact things inside of Ableton. So yeah, link is at the top of the description. Thank you so much for all the support, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.